Long before Fanta was ever poured into a bottle, there was Coca-Cola. Cold, bubbly, and unmistakably American. But what many people don't know is that in the years before and during World War II, Coca-Cola wasn't just a drink in Germany. It was a symbol caught between two worlds, a story of business, survival, and unexpected invention in the heart of Nazi Germany. The story begins in the 1920s, when Coca-Cola was expanding fast across Europe. The company wanted every country to know that distinct flavor and logo. In 1929, Coca-Cola GmbH was established in Germany, and within a few short years, it became one of the drink's biggest markets outside the United States. German families loved it, soldiers loved it, even government officials were known to enjoy it. For many, the red label and the sweet fizz became a small piece of modern life, a taste of the new world. But then came the 1930s, and Germany was changing rapidly. The Nazi regime had taken control, and nationalism became the new law of life. Anything foreign, especially American, was viewed with suspicion. Yet, Coca-Cola continued to grow. How? Because the local managers knew how to adapt. The German branch, led by Max Keith, rebranded the drink as something German, a beverage that fit into the rhythm of the Reich without openly defying the government. It was a careful dance between politics and business, and somehow it worked. Coca-Cola's factories in Germany didn't just survive, they thrived. Ads appeared at sporting events, factory workers drank it during shifts, and the company even sponsored rallies and festivals, always careful to avoid political symbols, but close enough to show support for the new Germany. It was business survival through subtle compliance. While Coca-Cola's headquarters in America had limited control due to growing tensions, the German branch made sure the brand remained alive. Then came 1939. The war began. Communication between the United States and Germany was nearly impossible. Shipments of the syrup, concentrate from America, the key ingredient to make Coca-Cola, stopped completely. Without it, production halted. The factories stood still, machines silent, bottles empty. For any other company, that would have been the end of the story. But Max Keith refused to let the brand die. He was a businessman, but also a survivor. He gathered his chemists and factory workers and told them to invent something new, a drink that could be made only from ingredients available in wartime Germany. Things like whey, a byproduct of cheese-making, fruit pulp, and whatever sweeteners they could find. The result was something no one expected, a pale yellow drink with a fruity flavor, born out of scarcity and desperation. That drink was named Fanta. The name came from the German word Fantasie, meaning imagination, because that's exactly what it took to create it. It wasn't meant to compete with Coca-Cola. It was simply meant to keep the company's workers employed and the business running until the war was over. No one could have imagined that this improvised drink would one day become one of the most famous sodas in the world. As the war dragged on, Fanta became a quiet success inside Germany. It was used to flavor soups, baked goods, and even mixed with beer to create cheap, sweet beverages for the people. It was more than just a soda. It was a small luxury during a time when sugar, coffee, and chocolate were nearly impossible to find. People didn't think of it as an American product or a political symbol. It was simply something that made life a little less bitter. By 1945, when the war finally ended, the world had changed completely, and so had Coca-Cola's place in it. The American headquarters regained control of its German branch, discovering that Max Keith had kept the company alive under extraordinary circumstances. He had managed to preserve the factories, the workers, and the brand, all without betraying his American partners or openly siding with the regime. In many ways, he had done the impossible. When the U.S. forces entered Germany, they found warehouses filled with bottles of Fanta, a drink that technically didn't even belong to Coca-Cola's core brand yet. But they recognized its potential instantly. The formula was refined, improved, and within a few years, Fanta officially became part of Coca-Cola's global family. The drink born in wartime Germany would soon conquer peacetime markets across the world. And so, behind every bottle of Coca-Cola and Fanta, there's a forgotten chapter. A story of a company that survived by adapting, of a manager who defied collapse through creativity, and of a drink that turned scarcity into success. The Coca-Cola bottle in Germany wasn't just glass and syrup. It was a symbol of endurance, proof that even in the darkest times, a little imagination could keep a dream alive. When the war ended in 1945, Germany was no longer the proud industrial power it had been. Its cities lay in ruins, its people scattered and starving, and its factories either destroyed or seized by the Allies. The American forces arrived not just as conquerors but as rebuilders, bringing food, supplies, and something else that, in its own quiet way, carried a message: Coca-Cola. For the first time in years, the familiar red label returned to German streets. But this time, it meant something very different. During the Nazi years, Coca-Cola had adapted to survive. Now, it became a symbol of America's arrival, the taste of freedom, modernity, and the Western world. Soldiers carried it in crates, handing bottles to civilians, offering the same sweet drink that had vanished during the chaos of war. For many Germans, that first sip of Coca-Cola after the war was unforgettable. It wasn't just about the taste, it was about hope. The fizzy sweetness contrasted sharply with the hunger and destruction around them. Where bread and coal were scarce, Coca-Cola somehow felt abundant, a glimpse of a world where factories worked, lights stayed on, and happiness was something simple again. The Coca-Cola Company wasted no time re-establishing its presence. The factories Max Keith had managed to preserve became the foundation for a rapid comeback. Within a year, new bottling plants opened in Frankfurt, Hamburg, and Munich. The German branch worked closely with the American headquarters again, now with open communication and full access to syrup supplies from the United States. But the landscape of post-war Germany was complicated. The country was divided into zones: American, British, French, and Soviet. The brand that had once unified millions now had to navigate borders that didn't exist before. In the West, Coca-Cola thrived. In the East, under Soviet control, it disappeared completely. The drink that symbolized America was not welcome behind the Iron Curtain. In the 1950s, Coca-Cola's red trucks became a familiar sight across West Germany. Billboards appeared on rebuilt streets, showing smiling men and women sharing a bottle of Coke, symbols of prosperity and optimism. It wasn't just a beverage anymore. It was part of the new culture of the West. American music, movies, and products were flooding in, and Coca-Cola was leading the charge. For older generations, the drink carried a strange dual memory. They remembered the days when it was a local factory drink under Nazi rule, and now they saw it reborn as the drink of democracy. It was both foreign and familiar, both a reminder and a promise. For the young, however, Coca-Cola meant something else entirely. It represented modern life, energy, and rebellion against the old order. Holding a Coke bottle became a quiet statement: we are part of something new. Meanwhile, the East German population could only hear about it in whispers. Behind the Berlin Wall, Coca-Cola was banned, replaced by imitation colas made from local ingredients. But even there, rumors spread about how it tasted: sweet, fizzy, and full of the flavor of freedom. Smugglers and travelers sometimes brought bottles across the border, and people would share them secretly, as if sharing a forbidden dream. Coca-Cola's return wasn't without controversy. Some saw it as a form of Americanization, a symbol of cultural dominance rather than friendship. Critics argued that American companies were flooding Europe not just with products, but with ideals. Yet for most people, those arguments didn't matter. In a time of rebuilding, anything that reminded them of normal life was welcome. Coca-Cola understood that perfectly. The company didn't sell itself as an American brand in Germany anymore. It sold itself as everyone's drink. Ads focused on family gatherings, factory workers, and sports events, showing that Coke was part of everyday life. It became the drink you shared after work, at picnics, and during football games. And then, almost quietly, Fanta returned. The drink that had been born from scarcity during the war came back, now as an official Coca-Cola product, reintroduced with improved flavors and colorful bottles. Germans smiled when they saw it again, unaware that it had become a global sensation. The drink that was created because of war had now become a bridge between the past and the future. By the end of the 1950s, Coca-Cola had done something few companies could claim. It had not only survived the war, it had come out stronger. Its bottles stood proudly on store shelves across Europe, each one carrying more than just a beverage. Inside that glass was a story of survival, adaptation, and reinvention. In a divided country, Coca-Cola had managed to unite people again, not through politics or propaganda, but through something as simple as taste. It wasn't just a drink. It was a reminder that even in the ruins of the past, new beginnings could still bubble to the surface. The 1960s arrived like a spark in a dark tunnel, full of sound, color, and change. West Germany was no longer the defeated nation of rubble and ration cards. It was now rebuilding faster than anyone imagined, and the people were eager to leave the shadows of the past behind. Factories roared back to life, cities filled with lights again, and a new generation began to dream beyond survival. And in their hands, more often than not, was a cold glass bottle of Coca-Cola. The red and white label, once just an American import, had now become part of West German identity. Young people saw it not as a foreign product, but as a symbol of youth and energy, of a life filled with music, laughter, and hope. The post-war generation didn't want to talk about old battles or ruined cities. They wanted to talk about cars, fashion, and the future. Coca-Cola became their quiet companion in that journey. At street corners and train stations, Coca-Cola vending machines appeared, shiny red boxes humming with electricity, offering a taste of the new world at the push of a button. The sound of a bottle cap popping became part of everyday life, a small ritual that said, "The war is over, and the future tastes sweet." The company's advertising understood this shift perfectly. No longer about soldiers or survival, the message was about moments, sharing, dancing, smiling. Television commercials showed young Germans laughing on beaches, clinking bottles in the sun. It wasn't propaganda, it was possibility. And in a nation trying to find its new identity, that mattered more than words. But in East Germany, behind the Berlin Wall, things were different. The government promoted its own soft drinks, Club Cola, Vita Cola, made from beet sugar and domestic syrup. They were good, but not quite the same. Coca-Cola became a myth on the other side, the forbidden drink that represented everything Western. For East German youth, the sight of a Coke bottle in a smuggled Western magazine meant more than a product. It meant rebellion. The Cold War made even soft drinks political. When American troops stationed in Germany drank Coca-Cola, it wasn't just refreshment, it was a quiet declaration of influence. The brand became part of the Western identity, a symbol of capitalism itself. Yet, paradoxically, it wasn't seen as aggressive or threatening. It was friendly, cheerful, and simple, exactly what post-war Europe needed. In West Berlin, the Coca-Cola logo began appearing on cafes and bars that faced the wall. Red signs glowed in the night like small beacons of freedom. Tourists took photos with Coke bottles against the gray concrete, a silent contrast between color and control. For the company, it was unplanned symbolism. For the people, it was powerful. Music, too, played a role. The rock and roll wave from America swept into Germany, and wherever guitars and rhythm went, Coca-Cola followed. Young fans drank Coke at concerts, wore shirts with the logo, and copied American styles. The brand had become part of pop culture, woven into songs, posters, and even teenage slang. To have a Coke wasn't just to drink, it meant to take a moment, to live. Meanwhile, the Fanta story continued its unexpected journey. What started as a wartime substitute was now reinvented as a colorful, fruity drink for families and kids. Fanta commercials were bright and cheerful, filled with sunshine and laughter. Germans embraced it fully, perhaps unaware that they were celebrating something that had once been born out of desperation. Coca-Cola now had two stars, Coke and Fanta, both telling different sides of the same history. By the late 1960s, Coca-Cola's presence was everywhere. From small kiosks in Munich to neon-lit bars in Frankfurt, the drink was part of the new rhythm of life. Its glass bottles clinked in factories, schools, cinemas, and picnics. It had become more than a product. It was a cultural bridge between Germany and the wider world. But even success came with criticism. Intellectuals and politicians debated whether Germany was losing its identity to American culture. They worried that Coke, jeans, and jazz were replacing traditional values. Yet for most ordinary Germans, those concerns seemed distant. For them, Coca-Cola wasn't about politics. It was about normalcy, the comfort of something familiar in a changing world. The company continued to adapt. They sponsored local festivals, football teams, and cultural events. Their trucks appeared not only in cities, but in small villages, bringing with them a sparkle of red color and happiness. The brand didn't speak English anymore in its ads. It spoke German, it laughed German, it smiled German. By the time the 1970s rolled in, Coca-Cola was no longer a guest in Germany. It was a neighbor, a friend, part of the landscape, and in the living rooms of millions of families, as televisions flickered with news, variety shows, and football matches, one thing was often sitting on the table: a bottle of Coke, condensation shining under the warm yellow lights. Coca-Cola had done something no speech, no treaty, and no politician could fully achieve. It had connected people across generations, classes, and even borders. In its bubbles was more than sugar and syrup. There was a taste of memory, a taste of change, and above all, a taste of freedom. By the late 1980s, Germany stood on the edge of history once again. The Berlin Wall had divided the country for nearly 3 decades, splitting families, friends, and futures. On one side stood East Germany, gray, controlled, and isolated. On the other side, West Germany, bright, loud, and full of color. And somewhere between those two worlds, quietly waiting, stood Coca-Cola. The drink had become part of daily life in the West, but in the East it was still a dream. Western media often showed smiling people holding red-labeled bottles, a symbol of something unreachable. To drink Coke was to touch the outside world, even if only for a moment. But as 1989 approached, something began to change. In the streets of Leipzig and Dresden, whispers of protest began to rise. People were tired of walls, tired of fear, tired of waiting. They marched for freedom, holding candles, not weapons. Television cameras captured faces filled with courage and hope. And across the world, people watched. In the offices of Coca-Cola Germany, nobody could predict what was about to happen. The company had long dreamed of returning fully to the East, but politics made it impossible. They had trucks ready, warehouses waiting, and a plan drawn up for the day the wall might fall. That day came faster than anyone expected. On the evening of November 9th, 1989, the world watched as crowds surged toward the Berlin Wall. Guards stepped aside. Hammers struck concrete. Families that had been divided for generations finally embraced under the night sky. And amid tears, laughter, and music, something small yet unforgettable happened. A Coca-Cola truck appeared. Its red paint gleamed under the streetlights as it rolled through the crowd, crates of bottles stacked high in the back. People cheered, waving, reaching for the drinks. Soldiers, students, parents, all sharing the same simple joy. Cameras captured it all: the sound of bottles clinking, the fizzing of opened caps, the glow of neon red against the crumbling gray of the wall. In that moment, Coca-Cola wasn't selling a product. It was witnessing history, a divided nation taking its first breath as one. News outlets around the world showed images of people toasting with Coke bottles on top of the Berlin Wall. It became a symbol of unity, not by design, but by destiny. The same drink that once symbolized America's arrival now symbolized something greater: the power of hope, the sweetness of freedom, and the rebirth of a nation. Within months, Coca-Cola officially expanded into the former East. Old factories were rebuilt, and new ones rose in places like Leipzig and Dresden. For many workers, it was their first real job in a free market. They learned new systems, handled new machines, and joined the same workforce as their Western counterparts. The company made sure everyone wore the same uniform, drank from the same bottles, and stood on the same floor. No walls, no differences. Fanta, too, made its full return. The drink that had once been born from isolation now found itself reunited with its origin. It was poetic in a way. A flavor created during separation had finally come home. Coca-Cola's ads in the early 1990s were unlike anything before. They didn't sell a drink. They celebrated unity. Commercials showed families from both sides sharing their first Coke together. Children in East Berlin playing football with those from the West, laughing, exchanging bottles, forgetting for a moment that they had ever been apart. The slogan wasn't political, it was human. Together tastes better. The company's influence went beyond marketing. Coca-Cola helped rebuild community centers, sponsored youth programs, and even supported the 1990 FIFA World Cup celebrations, where German pride returned in full force. The red of the Coke label and the black, red, and gold of the flag often appeared side by side, not as rivals, but as reflections of a shared spirit. And in small, quiet moments across the country, people felt that change. In grocery stores that once sold only gray packaged goods, shelves now gleamed with color. The hum of vending machines became the soundtrack of a new era. And in homes once separated by ideology, the sound of a Coke bottle opening echoed softly, a reminder that the world had changed. By the time Germany officially reunited in 1990, Coca-Cola was there, not as a conqueror, not as an outsider, but as a witness. Through wars, walls, and rebirth, it had somehow remained constant, adapting, surviving, and evolving alongside the people it served. Today, when someone in Berlin or Munich opens a bottle of Coke, they might not think of history. They might just taste the familiar sweetness, hear the soft hiss of carbonation, and take a sip. But within that sound is a story that began in a divided world and ended in a united one. Coca-Cola didn't just refresh Germany. It mirrored its journey, from struggle to hope, from separation to unity, from darkness to light. And maybe that's the real secret behind its taste. Not the sugar, not the formula, but the story it carries. That even after the hardest times, something good, something human, can still rise and sparkle again.